What is this magic? It's you. And a dare key. That was enchanting, to say the least. Does this mean that she is the key? Eh? I heard something else walking. More eyes this time. Oh, oh. Am I supposed to make a rune? Well, right now I'm just making a mess. Well, I must be dreaming. You're the one I saw in my vision. Where are you floating to? God, you're creepy. You do actually remind me of one of my nightmares as a child. And then you suddenly open the eyes and that spooks me. Oh, you're coming closer. Hey. I can approach. Ooh. Are you a spirit of this forest? Does this tablet belong to you? Wait for me. You have a lot of twigs coming out of you. Ooh. That sounded very gooey, but you made spring happen. Oh. It looks inside, but this is next to a tree, obviously. Oh, the figurines. I saw this. There was a middle one and then the side one, so those were owls. Oh. Uh-huh. So that leads me there. Why do you make different sounds? You jump a little bit. You crouch a bit. But I cannot go from side to side. That's interesting. Am I supposed to bring them this toy that I saw? I'll probably never find a way back though. I hear running water. Ah, I went backwards over here. There's not much here. Is this the symbol I'm supposed to make? I'll try to remember this. Sound like a sigh somewhere. Ah. Ooh. Looks like a place where you burn things. Ah, there are those owls, and there's this spirit, I suppose. In this outhouse thing, which represents this magical place. I could get a hint that said, ooh, Årsgång, year walk, skogsrör, die Huldra. I think I remember this from, I'm not sure if it was Through the Woods or Unforgiving, but if it's just Swedish and not in general Scandinavian, then it would be Unforgiving, the Swedish game. Becka Hessen, the Brook Horse, Muelling, Nattraven, Kyrkogrimmen. That looks like a devil. The Yearwalk Encyclopedia is a collaborative effort between Simogo and Theodor Olmsten, who is the author of all the written content. Theodor Olmsten Curriculum Vitae. He was born in Stockholm 1968, but spent most of his youth in Edinburgh, where his mother was born. He graduated from Lund University in 1992 and is a Doctor Philosophiae at the Faculty of Ethnology. His lectures on the manifestations of evil in folklore has been full every term from 1998 and onwards. The manifestations of evil in folklore sounds interesting. Theodor has written 3 books on Scandinavian folklore. The Crone's Tongue has been translated into 16 languages and received the prestigious Hornet Award in 1999. He has had numerous appearances on Swedish television, and an unaired children's short film called The Grimm was partially based on Theodor's research. Oh, I can click on these. We're holding a heart. The Church Grimm. Of all the creatures in Swedish folklore, the Church Grimm was doubtlessly the most complex and certainly the most feared. So maybe it's the Church Grimm I saw the statue of, not just a deer. Little is known of it, since it was considered bad luck to even speak about it. The Church Grimm's appearance varied, which could possibly be attributed to the nature of the Church Grimm's origin. When a church was built in medieval times, an animal was sometimes buried alive under the floors, most commonly goats, since these were comparatively cheap. Here in Norway, where I live, there's also the Akershus fortress, which is in the capital, which was also the fortification in case someone tried to sail into the fjords and take over the country. When they built this fortress, they actually, rumors say that they had a dog placed inside one of the walls and then just bricked up the wall and let it die in there, because this would trap the soul there, and it was considered good luck and good fortune. However, many people claim to have seen this dog. It is referred to Malkanissen, or the evil dog, I think would be the proper English name, and always brings bad luck. And people who see it usually die a year later. Well, so this is a common hearsay then. Just killing people like creatures like this. There have also been stories of criminals being buried alive as punishment. In other versions, the criminal's heart was cut out and placed inside an animal carcass that was sacrificed. Kyrkogrimen. So he's holding the heart there. Also reminds me a little bit of Midsommar. Well, the heart was central in many of the myths surrounding the Grimm. Stories from the south of Sweden told that if you could touch the church Grimm's heart, you could stare into the eye of creation. The church Grimm guarded the church against thieves and grave robbers, but because of it, even honest folks avoided the church at night. Some stories say that if you were unlucky enough to be the last one to die during the year, you would serve the church Grimm the following year. There are other stories that suggest that the church Grimm was not a guardian at all, but rather a sort of parasite that was drawn to the energy of the church. While there, it fed on people's hopes, dreams, and fears. A recent and controversial theory suggests that the church Grimm was closely related to a nameless Bronze Age deity. Probably should have saved you for last, shouldn't I? Årsgång. There's the church. Don't go there, it looks like nighttime. Year walking was at its core a vision quest, with the purpose being to foresee the future. There were very rigid rules concerning the year walk, and not adhering to them could prove very dangerous, even fatal. Yeah, we were even asked to not even do it because, don't you remember what happened to our cousin? How the practice of year walking came to be is shrouded in mystery, but it seems to have been a widespread practice in Sweden until the beginning of the 19th century, and in some rural areas as late as the beginning of the 20th century. The practice was likely over 1,000 years old and most certainly pagan. Year walking varied greatly regionally, and even locally there might have been differences between one village and the next. That's with most things in Scandinavia and many other places. All the variations had a couple of elements in common though. Especially in Scandinavia, or at least Norway, where there was a lot of mountains, fjords and so communities didn't contact each other as commonly as other places, which explains all the dialects up here as well. A year walk could not be done on any common day. There were certain days a year when the gate was opened. Oh, so this gate leads to the year walk. Generally in Lajaisan, I don't know that word at all, with important festival days such as May Day. May Day? That sounds like a critical day, you know, when the plane goes down or anything. Midsummer's Eve or Christmas Eve, and most commonly New Year's Eve. A year walker could not partake of any of the food or drinks that were served on these days. A sacrifice of no little significance, since these feasts were some of the rare occasions when food would be plentiful and varied. A year walker had to avoid other people, so they commonly locked themselves in dark rooms and were not allowed to see a fire for the entire day. Well, this girl seemed to lock herself in the windmill, and even warned us against doing the same thing. Maybe I'm wrong though. Let's hope we are. Perhaps not a vast sacrifice on Midsummer's Eve, but on cold winter days it will be uncomfortable at least, if not hazardous. If the year walker followed these steps, he would leave his dark room at the stroke of midnight. This would be his last chance to cancel the year walk. Once he ventured out, there was no turning back. The church was the final destination for a year walker. On his way, he would typically encounter a number of supernatural creatures, which would pose a threat physically, mentally, and spiritually. If a year walker made it to the cemetery, he would walk around the church in an intricate pattern. This would open the year walker's eyes to the future, but it would also lure out the church Grimm. There we go. A little bit of a game of a cat and mouse there. Is it really worth it? So seeing the future, that would be a nice little gift. At least there and then. After having completed the year walk, the walker would see visions that could manifest themselves in different manners. I also assume that this could also make one clinically insane as well. Maybe many are. Maybe that's what happened to our cousin. When the year walker left the cemetery, he might for instance see a somber procession of dancers dressed in their finest church clothes. Well, I already saw a spirit floating around the woods even though I didn't officially start the year walk yet. And I'm not sure if I want to at this point. These would be the people that would die in the following year. So that's one way to tell the future. A reoccurring theme is of course the year walker who meets his own ghost on the road. Oh. Another story tells of how the walker would see newly dug graves. Oh god. Love played a great part too, so a walker would typically meet wedding processions or even attend weddings yet to come. One testimony from the late 19th century tells of a mental patient named Martin Nilsson, who described his visions as otherworldly experiences. Before I saw what happened next year, I lived among the stars. I lived there for many lifetimes, it seemed. What do I care for next year? Time has already ended. Today, the practice seems to be almost entirely forgotten. Yeah, on purpose, I believe. Because otherwise, this is amazing in a way, but oh, this is gonna be very... If I truly do this walk, this is gonna be very trippy. The Huldra. So that's what I saw. That is what I saw. This is the encarving I saw, and oh, maybe the encarvings are for different folklore then. See the sticks sticking out there, and even a tiara of sticks. The Huldra is known to have played a part in Norse mythology, but she is likely of an even older origin, from when man lived off the forest rather than the fields. The Huldra was the guardian of the forest. She tended to the trees, plants and animals. A single large tree in a grove surrounded by smaller trees was often considered to be the Huldra's home. Yeah, it looked like I entered some sort of tree. Like there was nothing there, but when I walked forward, I was on the inside. What seemed like a tree. Often considered to be the Huldra's home or even the Huldra herself. In most stories, she presented herself as a beautiful young woman. In my case, a hovering spirit. This was however not her real appearance. Very few saw the Huldra's true face, and even fewer lived to speak of it. Let's make us part of that statistic of living to speak of it. She was often described as a lonely and woe-filled creature. Her relationship with humans was very complex. Let's hope that that procedure usually doesn't involve death. She could enthrall a man with her beautiful song. Yeah, she was humming and there was an ambience and everything. And lure him deeper and deeper into the forest, where she either wedded or killed him. The men kissed by the Huldra became apathetic and slow. You lured me. According to some accounts, the Huldra was a positive force. If a hunter was kind to the Huldra, she might blow her breath down the barrel of his rifle, which would bless his hunt. Colliers considered her their friend, and she kept fires from spreading from their charcoal kiln. She also helped those who willingly offered their blood to her, but this was dangerous as the Huldra might drink the giver dry. Oh my. The Huldra was thus capable of doing both good and bad deeds. It was very hard to predict whether she would help or harm, since she played by rules known only to her. Once again, her relationship with humans was very complex. Oh, the brook horse. Looks like you're either drowning or just for me this looks where they're in the water, it seems, standing up. Sweden is a country that has a lot of lakes, rivers, streams, and brooks, and Swedish folklore is filled with strange creatures residing in the dark waters. The brook horse was a pale horse who lived in creeks or lakes, luring children to ride on its back. The brook horse's spine grew for every rider that it lured on top of its back. When the brook horse was satisfied, it leaped into the waters, whereupon the children drowned. You look like a creepy horse, don't you? Beckahessen. I wonder if this is this one traditional horse decoration, that this comes from this folklore, possibly. I don't know, I will have to check this out. The brook horse had a lot of common with the Nix, a handsome young fiddler who lured young girls down into the water, and according to some, they were one and the same. It's likely that the brook horse was made up to keep children from playing too close to the water. I think this is Näcken from Unforgiving, which did the same thing as Näcken in Norwegian folklore, but those two were still very different, but they were both residing in the water trying to drown people and luring them. So the Nix. Maybe Nix is the English name of Näcken. One of the more unusual descriptions comes from a story told in the north of Dalarna. That's quite north in Sweden, I believe. A young man is on his way home from his work at a charcoal kiln. He decides to wash up in a nearby creek. The man finds a strange stone, formed like a small child in the water. He picks it up. The man notices that he's not alone. He is being watched by a horse walking on two legs. Seemed like you were walking on two legs in the water. The horse stretches out a human hand. How? To the man, who gets frightened, of course, and runs home to a shack where he shares with his fellow workers. He tells the tale to his comrades, who laugh at him and call him a drunken fool. He shows them the stone that now looks quite ordinary. The man curses and goes to bed. When the workers wake up the following morning, they find the man dead in his bed. His lungs are filled with water, and the stone is nowhere to be seen. The brook horse was almost always closely associated with death, not always in a negative way. Oh, okay, like a Grim Reaper? For instance, in the sad folk tale Lille Nils, the brook horse is the one who finally leads Lille Nils' soul home and thus ends his long series of misfortunes, sort of like Anubis in Egypt. Well, I believe I might have to watch out for this stone. Small child in the water. Okay. Muelling. The Muelling. Infanticide was a fairly common crime in Sweden during the 19th century and earlier. Infanticide? Well, icide usually refers to killing. An infant is a child, and you look like a tiny infant, a tiny child, so I guess killing infants. Two most common motives were that there was no room for another mouth to feed, or that the child had been conceived outside of wedlock, which I suppose means, well, not your spouse's child, but someone else. And, yeah, cheating. The souls of these unfortunate children became Muellings. Typically, the Muellings were murdered by their mothers, often unmarried women who had been left to fend for themselves. The Muelling would commonly be left in the woods to die, or they would have been drowned by their mothers in brooks or bogs. Oh no. It's probably even a real thing even. Like, not necessarily. This might just be folklore, but this happenings, I do not doubt at all, sadly. Some Muellings died at the hands of angel makers. The angel maker would typically be paid by the child's poor mother to find a decent home for the infant. When the mother left The infant was murdered. Oh no. That's such a scam. The mother was already poor and she trusted you. Oh, well. The most common way for the Muelling to haunt was through a horrible wailing sound. The Muelling might take the form of ball of light similar to those of an Erebulus, which is a Scandinavian will-o'-the-wisp. I always think of Japanese folklore when I hear something like this. I'm not sure if it's related, but... and lead the curious traveler astray. Sometimes they would cry for their mothers to breastfeed them, which would apparently set them free. One story from Bergslagen tells of an old farmer on his way home through the forest. He's approached by a small child who follows him and says, "Grandfather, grandfather, I am so hungry." The old man tries to ignore it, but the child keeps on nagging. So finally, the old man loses his patience. "If you can find someone to feed you, then feed, but you won't get any milk from me." The child seems pleased and leaves. When the old man comes home, he finds his daughter lying dead on the floor, bleeding from her chest. Oh God. The child he met was the spirit of his murdered grandson. A person who helped the Muellings find their way to the other side was often left with a gift. According to some sources, the Muelling would be taken in by other supernatural creatures such as Hobbs, or if it had been drowned, the brook horse. Yeah, they mentioned something like this. The night raven. Carrion birds were deeply linked with misfortune and death in Scandinavian folklore. The night raven or nattravn was certainly no exception. Well, that explains the setting, the little setting in Röki, where the raven was sort of a outcast, did some bad deeds. The night raven was described as a large bird with a sharp beak, sometimes with holes in its wings. If a person gazed through those holes, he would become ill. Other stories told of a giant skeleton bird that it could never satisfy its hunger. Travelers foolish enough to be out at night risked being devoured by the terrible bird, especially at festival days such as Christmas or New Year's Eve. The night raven has also been described as an ordinary raven, but if it landed on a house, someone would die shortly with a terrible fever. Overall, the night raven was strongly associated with disease. So an omen. When farmers sent their children out to collect wild birds' eggs, they had to be careful that they did not pick the eggs of the night raven. Those eggs were considered deadly, but if the child was unsure, he could knock on the egg 3 times and say, "Out with thee, evil spirit." If the egg belonged to the night raven, it would turn black, like the raven herself. The night raven not only infested the eggs, it also possessed birds, preferably carrion birds. According to some sources, the night raven was a spirit of an evil, greedy man who had not been buried properly. The greed manifested itself in the night raven's fondness for shiny objects. That is quite deep lore here. I didn't know it. This is very intriguing. It actually feels like it's as grotesque as the Pamali folklore at this point. There's the church Grimm. I read through all of them already? Well, I thought I was barely halfway there. And now I'm thrown back here. Oh, God, I feel like a whole different person already. Oh, and of the things I saw and everything. The sounds I hear might be the Muelling calling for me then.